Warm welcome, everyone, at World Bank HQ and to all those tuning in virtually from around the world. My name is Shweta Grace Epen. I'm the pitch competition co-lead for this edition of the World Bank Youth Summit 2024. Thank you all for joining to today's fireside chat, AI for All, Harnessing Artificial Intelligence for Global Progress. Now, we all know that AI has the potential to transform various industries and impact our daily lives in significant ways. While we need to be mindful of the potential risks and ethical considerations, the benefits of AI cannot be overlooked. And as this technology continues to evolve, we must embrace its potential and harness its power for global progress. We have a distinguished panel of experts here today to share their insights on this, and let me briefly introduce them to you. We have Andrew Melruzzi, Emerging Technology Advisor on the Emerging Technologies team at USAID. He works on initiatives such as Gender Equitable AI, USAID AI Action Plan, the Mozilla Foundation to reshape computer science curricula, and responsible AI training for USAID staff. We have with us Christine Jinwei Shang, the Director of the Digital Development Global Practice under the Infrastructure Practice Group of the World Bank. She heads a team supporting digital transformation in developing countries to drive shared prosperity and reduced poverty. We have Justina Nixon Sentil, Vice President and Chief Impact Officer at IBM, leads IBM's efforts across educational partnerships and invest in future of work through educational programs such as IBM Skill Build, as IBM's environment, social, and corporate governance focal point. She spearheads corporate practices such as ethics and transparency in its operational and environmental footprints. We have with us Luisa Franco Machado, a UN Young Leader for Sustainable Development Goals. She is also a technical advisor in feminist data governance and intersectional AI ethics for international organizations worldwide. She's also co-led key youth negotiations on data ethics at the European Dialogue on Internet Governance. Thank you all very much for joining us today and for being a part of the 2024 Youth Summit. I'm really looking forward to seeing an exciting conversation surrounding the promises and pitfalls of this transforming technology. All right. So before we begin, just a few logistical notes that at the end of the session, we will have 10 minutes for Q&A for our youth delegates, both in person and also online. This time, it would be arranged a little differently, where you could raise your hand and the mics would come to you. And then, okay, I see that was a request made by the delegates. Yes, our team has taken that into consideration. So the mics will come to you. And let's get started. All right. So let's begin this conversation with a spark of optimism. All right. So the past couple of years have seen remarkable strides in AI and automation, igniting a wave of optimism for its potential across various industries. And when we consider the UN Sustainable Development Goals, AI stands at a pivotal force of achieving these objectives, whether it's eradicating poverty or fostering sustainable urban development. AI holds, in a way, a key solution for innovative solutions. So I guess my first question to the panelists would be, what role does AI have in achieving SDGs? And it would be great if you could draw on some examples or experiences or providing instances where AI has directly contributed to these goals. So I will start with Luisa, who's sitting right beside me. I also have another question for you, which is, how do you think young innovators can be supported in their efforts to leverage AI for sustainable development and social impact?
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here all the way from Germany, although I am from Brazil. So the Latin Americans in the room, shout out. I wanted to... I wanted to first start by saying that you're totally right, Shweta. AI has the power to make significant strides towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. But as we are tired to hear, only if we use it wisely and ethically, right? And I think that this is especially important in development work because here the stakes are incredibly high and inclusive. The colonial approaches, they are not just nice to have, they are just essential. They're almost mandatory. You know, when we consider AI's role in achieving the SDGs, it's not just about the technology itself, but rather about how we implement and govern it to make sure that it benefits all communities equally. And I think that without this in mind, I would go as far as saying that it's impossible to make good work using technology for development if we don't have this sort of, the colonial approach. And I think that considering that, I wanted to bring a very, very clear example of that, of how AI can be transformative when used wisely. I wanted to actually go all the way to the Pacific Ocean and actually talk about an initiative called Papa Rail. It's incredible. I think that when you hear it, you can see why it's different from other initiatives we've heard. So it's an initiative that it's dedicated to revitalizing the Maori indigenous language in New Zealand. And this initiative truly goes beyond just using AI to create language learning tools in this case, because what it does is that it brings up an indigenous data sovereignty framework. The governance structure of this initiative ensures that all data related to the Maori language and culture is managed, stored, and used in a way that respects and upholds the rights of the Maori indigenous people. All data collected and used by the Papa Rail initiative is owned by the Maori community. And the initiative is also transparent about how data is used and who has access to it, with regular audits by the community itself. And I think that this example underscores a crucial point, which is that in development work, the colonial approaches must be our guiding light. We need to consider how to work with both new technologies and traditional knowledge, and indigenous wisdom must be then highlighted, right? So I think that this would be my example on the AI part and SDGs. And I think just go briefly to your second part, the second part of your question, right? So how can young innovators be uplifted and supported? And while each young person is inherently different and their needs are different, I think that one thing that we all need in order to thrive is it's for systemic barriers to be addressed. And when I say this, I say that the often overlooked reality faced by youth in accessing economic opportunities, including in AI and tech, is heavily influenced by discrimination and bias, right? For example, today, more than 1 in 4 transgender youth have lost their job due to bias. LGBTQIA youth, young women, and people of color are still massively underrepresented in technology sectors. And this underrepresentation is not due to a lack of interest or even ability, but rather the systemic barriers that these communities faced. So I think that here the question isn't whether the AI revolution will create jobs, but rather who will these jobs be for, right? So I think that when we talk about AI development, we really must tear down these systemic injustices and not perpetuate these structures. So I think that that would be sort of my little contribution on how we can actually move forward in a meaningful way.
Yep. Thank you, Louisa. You touched upon a lot of relevant and important topics of inclusivity and ensuring that local cultures and traditions are incorporated in. And I also think another important discussion would be taking into account partnerships of different stakeholders that are essential for implementing these goals. Justina, if you could touch base on some of the ways in which AI can achieve SDG goals, but also what are some of the key factors that partners need to consider when they take up such collaborations with different stakeholders?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. Good morning. So first of all of the work that we do around social impact at IBM is underpinned by SDGs. A bulk of our work is focused on SDG 4, right? quality education for all. And we have a program called IBM Skills Build. It's open, available for anyone to access, gain training, learning pathways around AI. And they can move through these learning pathways to badges, credentials, and use it to look for new employment in that area. So definitely SDG 4 is a huge part of the work that we do. But when we think about the other SDGs, SDG 2, SDG 6, 7, and 11, we're really focused on sustainability in those areas, right? Everything from how do we create the most resilient cities against climate change and environmental threats? How do we deliver clean energy solutions to rural areas and areas that need it the most? You know, how do we look at water management and even sustainable agriculture? So we focus very much on the guiding principles around the SDGs, around all of the work that we do. So on the sustainability side, we launched a program around 2 years ago focused on how do we leverage IBM's platforms, our weather data, our AI solutions, and how do we partner with nonprofit organizations and governments to create solutions or iterate on solutions, bringing in our AI data and our AI platforms, geospatial analytics, you name it, and how do we use all of the expertise of our company, but also the expertise of our partners, right? Our community partners are those who understand the local areas that we want to impact the most. And that's where partnerships really come into the mix. Finding the right partner, understanding the expertise that they bring, the engagement with the communities, but bringing in the expertise of IBM and the platforms and all of the other resources we have at IBM to really make a difference in those communities. So I'll use one example around sustainable agriculture. We deployed that program a couple of years ago, and we're leveraging weather data and other data from IBM to really help farmers, smallholder farmers, make decisions on when to water, right? Just even using LLMs, right? And we've expanded the program looking at LLMs to analyze water, you know, the soil and the moisture in the soil, and helping also upskill those farmers to make sure they understand how to interpret that data, how to interpret that information. And we're already seeing that we've increased yield in some of the areas where we've deployed this, in Texas, in Malawi and other areas as well. So this just gives you a prime example of why partnerships matter with the right organizations to have an impact in our communities, but also why it's important for companies like IBM to really leverage the guiding principles around the SDGs, and bring our expertise and our resources to make a difference. This is not something that could be done, right, in a silo. This needs government, it needs business, and it needs our NGOs and community partners to make it happen.
Brilliant points. It's absolutely essential to integrate resources and networks. And I really like that you touched upon digital literacy as well, which is also important. Christine and Andrew, I would love to hear your thoughts as well on how such partnerships and NGOs, between governments and NGOs, can contribute for accelerate these projects of AI focusing on global progress. You can have Christine and then Andrew. Yeah.
Good morning. First, Shweta and the Digital Summit organization team, I'd like to thank you for inviting me today. It's really energizing actually to be in the room together with all the young professionals, innovators, practitioners, researchers, and also, maybe some students among yourselves. And I'm also particularly happy to see how many women are in the audience as well as in the panel. Very, very good. And the other important thing is that you are actually the digital natives, and you are going to drive the development and use of ethical and responsible AI. So we actually count on you for the many years and decades to come. So now coming back to your question on SDG, the World Bank's view is that now we are living in a very complex world, and a lot of the SDG challenges are multifaceted. So they are complex ones that require actually complex and sophisticated and multi-stakeholder solutions. And in that context, AI plays a big role as, the big data, the data analysis, the predictive power, but also the ability to bring a lot of analysis and people and stakeholders together is really key for us as an enabler for all sectors in all countries. So maybe I just give you one example in Belize, because if I look at the decades to come, to me, the biggest two mega trends are digital and climate. So this is one example how these two come together. Is in Belize, we helped government actually develop big data and a machine learning model to predict the consumptions of energy sector. This model actually tests the impact of not only policies, but also investments, just to see how the different models will generate different impact. So this initiative contributes specifically to SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy, by enhancing energy efficiency and resilience, but also to SDG 13, which is climate action, by improving climate adaptation strategies and implementation. And as I said earlier, given that all the development solutions are so complex these days, definitely we need to work together. So I just mention a little bit how we work with different stakeholders. You probably know that governments are our main clients for the World Bank. So here, for me, it's very important to basically, support the countries to create a very enabling environment for AI innovation while mitigating related risks. So that's really the hardcore role of a government. And now comes to private sector. I think, the IBM, Justina mentioned very clearly that ultimately the technical expertise and innovation really comes from industries. And I was reading a Stanford study in 2023 that shows that industry produced 4 times as many machine learning models as purely research institutions. And another MIT study showed that almost 70% of all AI PhDs are employed in industries. So that really shows the industry power of innovation and technology expertise. But we also work with academia. And here we are focusing on building the next generation of informed policymakers, because as you can see, a lot of decisions will be decided by government officials and policymakers. So we team up with academia to bring private sector and others, but really have very targeted training courses for the next generation of policymakers. And our vision is really to build a global community of well-versed policymakers that understand AI, understand the nuances of AI, because it's not black and white. And a lot of decisions they need to make need to be balancing multiple public objectives. Last but not least, Shweta also asked, what about NGOs and the civil society? They are also very critical because they know the local needs. They help us to customize our design and implementation towards the local needs and the local context. Thereby, we can maximize the use of AI and maximize the benefits. Maybe in conclusion, I just want to leave you with some statistics, because I know you're probably very good with numbers. Again, coming back to the SDG question, that's kind of the overarching big picture question for the World Bank, is the largest development agency, is that the role of digitalization is beneficial for 70% of the SDGs, direct link. And our study also shows that countries with a higher level of digitalization, they have made 40% more progress on SDGs. I'll leave the numbers with you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yep, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple words. So on the point of, particular applications that we've seen, it's often the case, as Christine sort of gestured to, that USAID, as a government agency, we are not often in the business of building a new AI system, right? We're much more in the business of trying to, eliminate the barriers, as Louisa said, or, sort of support the basic infrastructure that would allow for a kind of responsible AI ecosystem overall. But we do have kind of a number of projects getting to the partnerships question where we are, I live in DC, right? Like to me, the thing that we are seeking is expertise on the ground, people who live in the country that we're aiming to support and who really know the context and who understand, yes, AI is going to be a useful tool here. No, it's not going to be a useful tool here. And so in India, one of the projects that USAID is supporting is focused on, using an AI system to better predict which patients with tuberculosis might end up dropping out of their treatment. Obviously, this is very important if, people remain healthy, but also to reduce the spread of tuberculosis. And so this AI system essentially is trying to understand, like, what are the factors that would lead someone to drop out of treatment, and can we kind of intervene with that patient, call them on the phone, visit the village, get a community leader to talk with them and have them remain in treatment. And so this is the kind of thing that, this might not be a super profitable tool for a private sector company to build, but USAID is working with the social impact group on the ground called Wadhwani AI to build this tool and, eventually have this folded into the government's kind of tuberculosis care system. So that's a situation where, we are very much looking to work with someone on the ground who has expertise that we at USAID don't. That's very often just one other quick example of that kind of thing. We have this Equitable AI Challenge, basically a grant program to prevent gender inequity in AI systems. And one of the grants we had was to a kind of policy think tank in Mexico that was working directly with the state of Guanajuato, Mexico, on a system that the state had already set up to identify children, young women and boys actually, who would drop out of high school. And the premise of this project was to figure out, is that AI system being gender equitable in the way it's predicting which students might drop out? And it turned out it was not. So it was essentially missing a bunch of young women who were at risk of dropping out of school, and it was not flagging those women. So no one was intervening with those young women and trying to help them remain in school. And so we essentially, gave a grant to this organization to do an audit on the system and try to figure out, like, could we adjust how the system is working to produce gender equitable results? And now that's what's happening. So again, like, we are very much looking to partner with people on the ground who know the context, understand, how could AI be useful here? What are the kinds of things we would need to look for to make sure that it is useful?
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I guess it's always great to know that different voices are taken into consideration and different objectives are trying to be met in all the projects, especially local voices. And I think something else when people often think of AI is there's a sort of trepidation or a concern of safety, of protection, of privacy concerns, and how is your online data protected? And I think it would be great to quickly discuss on, although there's a lot of excitement and potential for a lot of these projects, but how do we mitigate such risks, and how do we ensure that there's ethical objectives and concerns are met? I know this covers a lot of topics, and we've also many of you have also already incorporated that in your examples, as well as like the Equitable Project, which tries to focus on inclusivity. And Louisa, you also mentioned on inclusivity. But maybe we could quickly go over, I'll start with you, Louisa, again, on what demographics do you see? I know you touched upon this a bit earlier as well, that have higher vulnerability to cybersecurity threats and risks. And what do you think should be the ways in which we can take efforts to mitigate these risks?
Sure. I think it's super important not only to talk about it, but also to recognize that it's a reality. And I think that this USAID example is perfect, which is understanding that sometimes our projects might not work the way we intended to, and being humble enough to recognize it and then put actions to mitigate these risks and solve these problems. I think it's incredible. So congratulations for this job. I think that when we talk about which demographics are at risk, I think that, as you said, like, for example, some demographics, they face higher vulnerabilities for a number of reasons, right? So it can be systemic biases, digital literacy gaps, and also inadequate data protection laws. So I'll be touching on a little bit of that to exemplify how this can happen in practice. So I think that first, as we are unfortunately tired to hear gender minorities like women and other LGBTQA populations, for these minorities, the digital space can really be a minefield because of online harassment, doxing, and stalking. And what we see is that oftentimes when we talk about artificial intelligence, algorithms are usually developed and deployed by people from a similar demographic, which then leads to them bringing their own biases into these systems and then excluding or misrepresenting marginalized groups, particularly women, and when we are intersectional, women of color, and the queer community and so on. So I think that and when we add to that, for example, that gender non-conforming individuals, they not only face systemic biases in accessing these resources, but also in how the data on them is collected and which type of data is collected and by whom and what is used with this data. I think that then we enter really a space where it's just very dangerous sometimes to be queer online, to be a woman online, and we don't want that to happen, right? When we talk about data misuse, and what this can lead to is that it can lead to then tracking and harming these individuals, making being online a threat to them. When we talk about people of color, I think we enter also a whole nother set of discriminatory practices, including biased algorithms and pervasive surveillance systems. I think that one thing that I think it's important to keep in mind for all these groups is that when gender neutral or colorblind systems encounter patriarchal and racist structures, they become systems that are patriarchal and racist by design. And this biases leads to policies that fail to address the needs of these populations, furthering marginalizing them in digital spaces. So now when we try to explain these, several factors contribute to these vulnerabilities. One major issue is the lack of digital literacy. Without a solid understanding of cybersecurity, individuals cannot protect themselves online. But I would not like to put this burden on individuals either. You know, when we talk about how to make individuals safe online, we have to talk about effective policies and policies that are put into place that think about the individuals and the users in the first place. I think that insufficient data protection laws just exacerbate these problems. Many regions, especially in the global south, but not only, lack robust legal frameworks and enforcement mechanisms that end up leaving individuals unprotected. So I think that when we talk, okay, we understand the risks, how to mitigate them, right? Because if I was just talking about problems, then we would be missing half of the conversation. So I think that first of all, we absolutely need to strengthen our legal frameworks, and developing and enforcing robust data protection laws is just, you know, the first thing we need to do. Also, we need an intersectional approach. I think that policies should reflect the diversity of experiences across all social strata. And by adopting intersectional data practices, we ensure that the data collected reflects the diverse needs of our populations. So I think that this also combined with inclusive design and bringing more minorities into the development of these systems, we can then possibly, you know, mitigate these risks and address the vulnerabilities in a way that doesn't feel like we're just subjects of the digital era, right? But we can also lead it. I think that's very important.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of great points that were mentioned. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, so I can also see that the online chat, also a lot of great questions are also coming in, but definitely Justina, Christine, and Andrew, to quickly go over your thoughts on how companies can take account of such risks and what are some important measures that we can take and when we deploy AI on development projects.
Yeah, so I'm a part of our AI ethics board at IBM. And the board was established quite some time ago. I think we may have been one of the first, or at least one of the first few companies establishing an AI ethics board. And we did it because we have 3 guiding principles at our company around AI ethics, right? The first one is AI's purpose is to augment human intelligence. It is not to replace, it's to augment. The second one is that data and insights belong to the creator. I know that's something that has already been reflected here, but if we work with partners, with clients, we make sure that we protect their data and insights and they continue to own it. We don't own it. And the third is any type of technology that is being created, it needs to be explainable and it needs to be transparent. So as a part of the AI Ethics Board, these are our guiding principles as a company. And we come together on a regular basis to have discussions about the products we sell, how the clients plan to use them, what are the best responsible ways that we can create products at our company. And that's how we're protecting not just our clients, community, society, but we're protecting ourselves as well. The other thing that I would point out here is, we have a focus on precision regulation. And what that really means is that you're not regulating the tool itself. What you don't want to do is stifle innovation, right? If you think about entrepreneurs, research, universities, or many companies are focused on how do we create the right tools, leveraging AI, how do we make sure we're impacting society in the most positive way? We don't want to stifle that innovation. However, we believe that the specific use cases around how AI is used will need some guidance. Then that's our focus. How is it going to be used? Is it going to hurt the individual? Is it going to hurt our communities? Right? So that is the area that we want to focus on, more around the use cases around AI, but not the tool itself. So those are the ways that we're looking at how do you mitigate risks. But I can tell you the AI Ethics Board, the people around that table, the people giving their insights and expertise and those guiding principles make a difference. I'll leave with one additional point that I think is going to be important for all of you. You have to have the right people at the table, right? You have to have the diverse voices. That's why it's such a privilege for me to be a part of it. You want to have inputs and insights from lived experiences and diverse people, et cetera. So that's why it's so important. And I keep going back to this point. So important to make sure we are reskilling and upskilling ourselves and understand what AI means and what it means for us, our families, our jobs, and for society, and make sure we can be at that table to provide the voice so that we could remove biases, we could make sure we're having a positive impact in our community as well.
So before I get to what we are doing on the ethics use, I just want to highlight what the panelists already mentioned. So we are looking at digital risks here. And some of the risks are intentional and other biases are unintended. Just to give some examples, on cybersecurity, for example, there was a case a couple months ago, somebody impersonalized a CEO at a board meeting and got 20 million. So clearly that is intentional. But there are unintentional ones like the biases and fairness. That's because the data that AI is trained on could already incorporate the existing biases. If I can use the pitch competition, for example, you are going to go through, assuming there is a panel of AI judges, and assuming the previous projects that won, they are all urban projects, right? And then the judge may just select the urban ones thinking that they are the better ones, right? So I'm just giving these as examples. Of course, there's privacy and data protection issues. But again, I'm trying to say is that all the risks, they come from different angles, different purposes. So when we formulate policies and regulations, we need to understand where they come from so that the policies will be more targeted and more effective. Now, coming back to what we actually need to do. Last year, we developed a global, we call it Digital Progress and Trends Report. And there's an AI chapter there, so I really encourage you to read it. And to prepare that particular chapter, we actually did a survey among about 20 major AI companies, but also a lot of government counterparts, just to see what they say. So there's 3 things coming from that survey I would like to share with you today. The first one is industry leaders, they really highlight the need to align AI advancements with core organizational and societal values. And they advocate to focus on transparency, inclusiveness, reliability, and accountability to cultivate and maintain trust and fairness. I think we keep on saying fairness, trust, because this is a social contract, so to speak, between any governments and users. The second takeaway from that survey is about the industry leaders, but calling for structured yet robust regulatory frameworks that define ethical and responsible AI use policies and AI standards to uphold information integrity. And fundamentally, there is a need to prioritize ethical principles from the start of the design as we develop any projects from the start. It's almost like ethics by design principle. Last but not least, everybody in the survey says that this requires a global collaboration to tackle challenges like misinformation, discrimination, and misuse effectively. Because as we know, it's a complex world with a lot of geopolitical tensions. There's a lot of fragmentation in terms of AI governance. So this call for international collaboration, in my view, is critical.
I'll just say one thing on this point about regulation and how we think about AI governance and policy. There was a research paper that was published from George Washington University just down the road a couple of years ago. I'm sure there's been updates since then, but it was basically looking at what are among all the kind of national AI strategies and policies that currently exist, what was public participation in the creation of those strategies? And it was appalling, like almost none, right? Like governments across the world, well-intentioned people, but technocrats who are just creating AI policy based on what they're seeing, but without a lot of input from the public on what the public actually wants from these AI strategies. And so I think, like, as we're thinking about essentially all of the issues we've been discussing, there's this layer up, this meta layer, which is like, how do these policies get crafted in the first place, and who has a seat at the table and being able to say, this is what I want for AI where I live. And to that point, one of the projects that USAID has been supporting recently is called the Global Index on Responsible AI. And this is actually going to come out. The first edition is going to come out in 2 weeks on June 13th. And it is essentially a survey, a research study of 138 countries on how we're doing, the state of responsible AI, essentially. And this will have to do with kind of government actions and government policy, but also what private sector companies and civil society organizations are working on in all these countries. And essentially, it's a monitoring tool, right? It allows us to understand, like, moving forward year after year, like, are we actually advancing on the responsible AI goals that we're setting out to? So yeah, take a look at that when it comes out on June 13th.
Thank you very much. Definitely very insightful projects that are ongoing right now. So I guess in the interest of time, we will have 2 in-person questions. So just raise your hand and the team would get the mics. Oh, I really wish we could continue the conversation for much longer. And do we have the microphone? Okay, please
Hello.
go ahead. Just
Hi.
introduce yourself and then a
Yes.
brief question.
This is Syed Alitza. It has been a great talk, and thank you very much. In the context of harnessing artificial intelligence for global presence, how can we address and overcome the discrimination that international students often face in the job market simply because they come from a different background? What steps can be taken to promote inclusivity and fairness in hiring practices to ensure that talent individuals from diverse backgrounds can contribute effectively to AI advancements?
Thank you very much. Definitely an important question of inclusivity. I'm open to anyone who would like to
Yeah, I can say just very quickly, it's not an issue that I work on personally at USAID, so I'm not the best person to ask. However, I know that as part of the AI executive order that came out last year, the US AI executive order, that a big part of that was making sure that the US, for example, is able to attract and retain talent from all across the world. And so there's lots of steps being taken, outside my office from the government's perspective to address the very question that you're getting at.
Very quickly, I also feel that the World Bank probably can do more on diversity in terms of recruitment. But just two things to share, right? One is that any organization or any country really need to believe that diversity actually adds value, because otherwise it's a checking box exercise. But I really think, by having more international views or just views of women versus male, or just cultural or education background, it really brings value, brings productivity, brings the positive dynamics. I think at leadership level, if we don't believe that, then no matter what we do will not work. The second thing is relatively simple. I think you mentioned in your own question is that in the recruitment or in the process, right, just to make sure who select the candidates are diverse enough so that all the views will be taken into account.
Thank you very much. Do we have our second question from the audience?
Thank you. My name is Limi Kahabi. I'm from Tanzania. I'm a chairperson of African Youth Professionals, and also I'm a CEO of Women Investors Africa. My question is not far from my colleague, but I was concerned about the hardest of fund of NGOs and civil societies, about the engagement of the interiors people to get more knowledgeable about AI. I was very interesting to hear from the panelists about what the prior move that can be adaptive solutions or guidance that can be reaches the interiors, but also how many activities that we are doing as a youth. We are so concerned about working on it, but the problem is about the fund, how we reach those people. I'm so concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to? Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so we have a global footprint, and we provide access to our resources, especially the skilling, right? How do we first make sure that people have access to our training content, our learning pathways? We have, as I mentioned, IBM Skills Build, anyone can access it. So the first thing is making sure people understand what ethical AI is, and some basics around AI would help them understand how to work with their governments, how to work with other entrepreneurs or other funders, and understand what they need, the type of investment they need, and everything else that they may need to understand around AI to be able to get that kind of support. The other thing is a lot of companies are focused on solving the types of challenges that I mentioned earlier around sustainability, around making sure we're helping communities against environmental threats. Also, a lot of the companies are tied to the national agenda of the country to make sure they're supporting those areas. And a lot of the national agenda, workforce development and skilling, and sustainability. So making sure you understand what that national agenda is, how do you upskill and reskill yourself in those two areas, and to be able to have that conversation or business case or, the request for support for funding. I think that's important to understand. And again, there are a lot of available resources that you can access.
Just to mention that actually the World Bank will create a new digital vice presidency in a month's time as of July 1. So that means we will scale up our investment and support in many countries. that means there will be more resources to build the foundations and enablers for digital transformation. And I'll make sure that every project includes a skills component and really make deliberate efforts to reach out to rural areas or to women, to youth, right? And we'll put in KPIs for ourselves to achieve some targets.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful discussion, amazing points that were covered. And I do feel bad for not engaging with the online audience, but I believe a lot of the questions surrounding rural youth and FCV affected areas and how to build inclusivity were answered in our conversations. Thank you so much to all the panelists. It was a very exciting conversation, and we are definitely at the crossroads of innovation and responsibility, but let's leave with hope and optimism that we will have an inclusive platform for all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone.